Hi, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm part of the OKI team working on the digital inclusion of girls with disabilities. And today with my colleague Joylin, we are going to talk about the importance of launching and localizing an accessible and inclusive OKI for girls with disabilities. But first, Joylin will share with you a personal story.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joylin Alagarbis, and this is my friend Noah. Before birth, Noah had a bilateral prenatal stroke, and because of this, she was born blind with hearing processing issues, a number of developmental delays, and numerous sensory issues. She cannot walk without assistance and is mostly nonverbal. Noah communicates primarily through tactile sign language with some verbal approximation. She was 7 years old when we met. And today, Noah is a star student in the deaf-blind program at her school and a teenage menstruator. I've heard many stories about Noah's first period, her father's reaction when she bled through her pad in the middle of the night, and her parents' hesitation to switch to diapers during her period because they were worried that her toilet training would regress, but it didn't. Noah is not able to manage her period on her own and relies on caregivers to assist her every month. Speaking to her mother about it when asking permission to share her story, she emphasized that Noah actually adapted much more quickly to her monthly visitor than they did.
Thank you, Joylin. For someone like Noah, as well as for the estimated 700 million women and girls with disabilities around the world today, the challenges to managing menstruation hygienically and with dignity are even greater than for women without disabilities, as they face a double stigma due to both the social norms around gender and menstruation and having a disability. As a result, women and girls with disabilities are often excluded from mainstream interventions, and their needs, for example, having information shared with them in an accessible format, all the questions around how to best manage their periods according to their lived experiences and impairments are not addressed properly. By creating an accessible and inclusive digital experience, OKI aims to be valuable for all girls. First, to address some of the stigma and shame that surround menstruation for girls with disabilities. Answer some of the specific questions girls have in relation to managing their periods. And create a space for discussion for girls and their caregivers, who often lack knowledge and understanding of how to best support girls with disabilities as their body changes. Now, one of the most important aspects of creating an inclusive version of OKI is its accessibility. Using the Web Content Accessibility Guideline, which set the standard for accessibility of digital formats, for example, web pages and applications, we conducted a digital accessibility audit last December, which led to several improvements, especially for users with visual impairments. Some of the issues we found are common to most web pages and applications, for example, missing labels for elements and buttons appearing on a screen, as well as the lack of alternative text for images. The updated OKI version has addressed these issues, so all elements can be read by a screen reader, which is an essential tool for users with severe visual impairments. By reading out loud any content on the screen readers are necessary assistive products for girls who are blind to access and use an app like OKI. Digital accessibility is a constant journey, and we will keep pushing for even more accessible versions of OKI in the future by also listening to users' feedback. And this is another fundamental element of disability inclusion, the principle of nothing about us without us. For far too long, persons with disabilities have been left behind from mainstream interventions across all sectors of society, leading to persons with disabilities being largely excluded from health or education or employment opportunities, just to name a few. The nothing about us without us motto stemmed from the disability rights movements, which stresses the importance of including persons with disabilities early in the design and development of products, services, or policies that will impact their lives. It is about giving everyone the power of being a decision maker. For a solution like OKI, this means working with disability and accessibility experts to design an accessible and inclusive OKI, involving organizations of persons with disabilities or OPDs, and women and girls with disabilities across key stages of OKI deployment and localization to gather their views, their preferences, and their needs. We will continue to organize feedback sessions with girls with disabilities as OKI continues to grow in multiple countries. To organize inclusive consultation, well, it is important to know who your audience is in order to be in the best position to support participation. For example, as for everyone sharing their personal and intimate stories, it is critical to create a safe and inclusive space without judgmental behaviors and stigma. Ask what accommodations are needed to create an accessible environment and content. That can be, for example, ensuring the building is accessible for girls with physical impairments, using a wheelchair, having a sign language interpreter for deaf girls who require them. Because girls with disabilities will have diverse lived experiences in how they feel and perceive their environments, it is important to sensitize moderators to know how to best engage and communicate with girls with different needs and ways of being, and establish a trusting relationship with them and their caregivers if they are present in the room. Finally, at all times, treat participants with kindness and respect. And when in doubt, always directly ask girls what they need or what they want. Asking what girls want or need should also be part of any promotional activities and public campaigns. To start with, engage with girls early in the process to use their preferences on how they use digital tools and media, for example, what format, what platforms they prefer. Always use inclusive and positive language when talking about and with persons with disabilities. Words can hurt or heal, and this is all but true when talking about disability and girls with disabilities who have been subjects to derogatory and abusive language for far too long. Use when possible inclusive avatars, as designed here by TAI Tanzania, an OKI franchise partner in Tanzania. Inclusive avatars can further empower users by making them feel represented as they are. This representation also means using pictures of girls with disabilities from your community with their consent to make them feel even more visible. And as always, accessibility of text, images, and videos are key in web and social media activities to reach your audience. Now I would like to hand over to Jolene again to talk about creating relevant content for girls with disabilities.
Thank you, Michael. So we have created lots of new content in the Oakley Encyclopedia for girls with disabilities. And in order to create topics that feel relevant to them and that truly reflect some of the challenges they face, we did an extensive review of firsthand accounts of menarche and menstruation by girls with disabilities themselves. We read articles by wheelchair users, Instagram posts by girls in the deaf community, poems by young women who are visually impaired. We watched video interviews on autism and periods and vlogs by blind advocates. We reviewed educational material published by and for girls with disabilities. And finally, we reviewed global guidance by WaterAid, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, UNFPA, UNICEF, and many others. So these resources helped us to create topics that include, I use a wheelchair, so how do I put on a pad? I'm blind or visually impaired, how can I manage my period? And I have a catheter, what period products should I use? This information and more is also reflected in our quick quizzes and did you know content that OKI users get in their daily cards. Now, because caregivers have such an important role to play in supporting girls with disabilities during their periods, including helping to dispel myths about menstruation and disability, we've also created new content for caregivers. And to do this, we had a similar approach. We listened to the advice that girls with disabilities give to their caregivers. We read articles about menarche and menstruation by parents, caregivers, and disability advocates, and we returned to those global guidance documents on MHH. These sources helped us to create topics that include, I care for someone with an intellectual disability, or I care for someone on the autism spectrum. How can I support them during their period? We want to emphasize that from the beginning of this process, we have prioritized planning and mobilization of resources to ensure the content we deliver is effective, impactful, and representative of the needs identified by girls with disabilities themselves. Nothing about them without them. We've reached out to OPDs in several countries to organize consultations on this content, and their inputs will be directly reflected in edits to the existing information, and they will also shape subsequent content creation for OKI. And with that, I'll give the floor back to Michael to tell us about what else we should watch for in this space.
Thanks, Jolene. Yes, there is one thing to mention before we go, and that is the Disability Inclusion Toolkit that we will be publishing soon. First for OKI partners, to better support them on their inclusive journey with examples of best practices and easy to follow guidelines, such as basic principles of disability etiquette, the do's and don'ts of how to communicate with girls with disabilities, but also how to engage and partner with disability organizations, how to plan and facilitate inclusive consultations for girls with diverse impairments, as well as sharing tips on digital accessibility and developing local relevant content. Thank you for your attention. We hope this short session was helpful to shine a light on how important this work on disability inclusion for OKI is. Please feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions. Bye.